Hi guys, and welcome back to the Caribbean Spot. In today's video, we are covering China CELAC Forum 2025, opportunity or Trojan horse for the Caribbean. Let's get into this video. On May 13, 2025, Beijing hosted the fourth ministerial meeting of the China CELAC Forum, marking a decade of cooperation between China and the nations of Latin America and the Caribbean. CELAC, a regional bloc of 33 countries, represents over 600 million people. The forum allowed leaders to negotiate directly with China on trade, infrastructure, and cooperation. The promises were bold: partnership, cooperation, billions in investments. But behind the photo ops lies a question. Is this the beginning of Caribbean prosperity or a cleverly disguised Trojan horse? So what exactly came out of this high-stakes meeting? What did China put on the table? And what does it mean for the future of the Caribbean? Let's break down the economic promises first. At the forum, Xi Jinping announced a $9 billion credit line for CELAC nations, and analysts note that Caribbean nations already burdened with dollar debts could face currency risk with yuan loans. And this is according to Reuters. Two-way trade surged to $515 billion in 2024, again according to Reuters, with China pledging to boost trade by 30% by 2026. And this is according to the People's Dispatch. China also promised to increase imports of Caribbean goods, and this information is coming from the Associated Press and the BBC News. China pledged continued investment in clean energy, telecoms, AI, ports, and transportation infrastructure. Again, my sources are the Associated Press, BBC News, and Loop News. China offered 3,500 scholarships and 10,000 training opportunities for Caribbean nations over 3 years. This information came from Loop News. But behind the billions of dollars, infrastructure promises, and booming trade numbers lies a deeper undercurrent. Because this isn't just about money. It's about influence, leverage, and control. The Caribbean now finds itself caught between two global superpowers, battling for dominance in our region. Let's talk about the geopolitics. At the forum, Beijing positioned itself as a more respectful partner to the global south, especially in contrast to Washington. Chinese officials slammed the idea of a new Monroe Doctrine, making it clear Latin America and the Caribbean should decide their own future, not have it dictated from the north. And the tension isn't theoretical. It's playing out right next door. In Panama, a U.S.-backed consortium moved to reclaim port infrastructure previously under Chinese control. Trump called it a victory, reclaiming the Panama Canal, while China protested the move. It sent a clear message. The U.S. is willing to push back hard when it feels China is getting too close to critical infrastructure in the Americas. Even nations that still recognize Taiwan, like Haiti and St. Lucia, showed up at the forum. That signals something. China's economic magnet is strong enough to pull even Taiwan's allies into the room. Brazil's President Lula made the regional position clear. The fate of Latin America does not depend on Xi Jinping, the US, or the EU. It depends on whether we want to be great or stay small. So where does that leave the Caribbean? Caught in the middle of a high-stakes geopolitical chess match between a fading power trying to hold its ground and a rising one laying down infrastructure, influence, and incentives. For Caribbean leaders, the challenge now is clear. Engage both, but stay owned by neither. China isn't battling for influence in the Caribbean. It has already built it. While the US sends envoys and issues warnings, China has spent the last 2 decades pouring billions into infrastructure, handing out scholarships, and building stadiums, highways, and ports. This isn't a scramble for position. It's a long game that's already well underway. So the real question isn't whether China is present in the region. It's how deeply that presence is now shaping our economies, our governments, and our future. Let's look at the countries that have already felt the weight and the wealth of China's involvement. Jamaica secured over $2 billion in loans and $3 billion in Chinese investments. One of the most significant projects, the North-South Highway, which connects Kingston to Ocho Rios, funded and built by China under a 50-year toll concession. It improved infrastructure, yes, but critics say the long-term control raises serious questions about sovereignty and national interests. Guyana, now booming with oil revenues, has become China's top investment destination in the region. Chinese state-backed firms have funded bridges, luxury hotels, airport upgrades, and commercial centers, reshaping both the skyline and the economy. And it doesn't stop there. In the Bahamas, Chinese capital expanded Freeport Container Port through Hutchinson Ports. And in Antigua, Dominica, and Grenada, China helped finance and construct airports, stadiums, and public housing. In Suriname, a $545 million debt to China became a crisis when Beijing refused to restructure it, blocking a much-needed IMF bailout. These aren't pledges, they're completed projects. This is what Chinese influence look like when the ink has dried, the ribbon has been cut, and the payments have started. The Caribbean isn't just watching this play out. We're living in the middle of it. We've seen how China's influence has taken root, not just in political headlines, but in concrete deals. But this isn't just about investment flows or diplomatic strategy. It's about the projects that reshape a nation, the roads we drive on, the power we rely on, the networks we connect to. So what exactly did China offer in Beijing this time around? Let's break down the latest infrastructure, trade, and development initiatives because the promises are big and the stakes are even bigger. Pay attention. At the 2025 forum, China reaffirmed its commitment to the Belt and Road Initiative across Latin America and the Caribbean. In our region, this means expanded ports, new roads, upgraded power plants, and digital connectivity, all backed by Chinese financing. Projects like the Freeport Container Port in the Bahamas and road and bridge developments in Jamaica, Guyana, and Suriname are just a glimpse of what's already in motion. While no new mega projects were announced at the forum, Chinese officials confirmed that existing commitments have been delivered, And the new 9 billion US dollar credit line is expected to fuel the next wave. The next wave. Listen to that part. Colombia proposed a bold idea: a trans-Pacific fiber optic cable connecting Latin America and potentially the Caribbean directly to China. China welcomed the idea, and given its existing work on regional 5G networks and fiber systems, Caribbean nations may soon be negotiating for better digital infrastructure. China also emphasized clean energy and climate resilience. Solar farms in Jamaica and Guyana are already up and running, and Beijing pledged to expand its support for disaster response, sustainable agriculture, and coastal defenses, issues especially critical to small island states. Trade. While no new free trade agreements were signed, China promised to import more non-traditional Caribbean products like seafood, rum, and specialized agricultural goods. The forum also highlighted plans to improve maritime and air links, streamline customs, and expand e-commerce platforms to connect Caribbean producers with Chinese consumers. Finally, in development cooperation, China reinforced its support for healthcare, education, and cultural exchange. This includes prior commitments like medical teams and COVID-19 vaccine deliveries, and new momentum toward building hospitals, schools, and affordable housing, all under the multilateral CELAC framework. In short, China's message was clear: we're not just here to talk trade, we're here to build. So the promises are big. But in the Caribbean, we've learned not to just watch the ribbon cutting, we check the contracts. Because history has taught us not every project comes without a price, and not every partner gives without taking. Let's talk about the risk, the fine print, the warnings, and the deals that don't always make the headlines. Our first concern as a region shouldn't be what's being promised, but what's being pledged in our name. Because once the cameras leave, we're the ones left holding the debt, the contracts, and the consequences. Let's break down the risks. Debt and dependency concerns. If it looks too easy to get, it may be too costly to keep. Over the past 2 decades, China has lent over 8 billion to the Caribbean nations. Now, with another 9 billion on the table, critics are raising the red flag. Yuan denominated loans could expose already dollar-dependent countries to currency risk and repayment struggle. And if China's own economy slows, as analysts predict, it could leave Caribbean projects hanging in the balance. The debt trap, diplomacy debate. Loans with long shadows don't just build roads, they build leverage. Western voices warn that China's lending model may deliberately saddle countries with unimaginable debt. Examples include Jamaica, where a 50-year toll concession handed highway control to Chinese firms. The Bahamas, where a Chinese firm took over the Bahama resort after bankruptcy. Suriname, where 545 million in Chinese debt blocked an IMF bailout while China refused to restructure. Transparency and governance issues. If the people can't read the contract, the people can't protect the country. Many of these deals are shrouded in confidentiality clauses. Terms remain hidden not just from citizens, but sometimes from legislators. In Jamaica, The highway agreement only became public after it was signed. In Antigua and Dominica, financial details on major infrastructure projects remain undisclosed. Watchdogs say small governments often lack the technical capacity to evaluate complex Chinese contracts, risking one-sided agreements. Another area is Western pushback and security fears. When two giants fight for your attention, yes, Caribbean, you're special, ask what they're both hiding. The U.S. continues to caution Caribbean nations to go in with open eyes, or eyes open, however you want to say it. They point to the use of Chinese labor, the lack of local job creation, and growing concerns over Chinese telecom infrastructure potentially enabling espionage. In early 2025, President Donald Trump declared, China is running the Panama Canal that was not given to China. That was given to Panama foolishly. But they violated the agreement and we're going to take it back, or something very powerful is going to happen. Shortly after that warning, Panama announced it would not renew its Belt and Road Agreement with China, becoming the first Latin American nation to pull out under U.S. pressure. Meanwhile, a U.S.-led consortium, including BlackRock, struck a deal to acquire key port infrastructure on both sides of the Panama Canal, a direct response to concerns about China's growing influence. The message from Washington is clear. China's reach in the region has gone too far, and the U.S. intends to push back, starting at the Panama Canal and likely not ending there. And finally, protecting Caribbean power. We don't need a new master. We need a united strategy. Caribbean analysts agree we must stay strategic. Some governments like Jamaica have already started capping new borrowing and turning to public-private partnerships to avoid falling into unsustainable debt. There are also growing calls for CARICOM to take a united approach, sharing contract details, demanding transparency, and making sure no single island gets cornered into a deal that could set a dangerous precedent for the entire region. At the end of the forum, China and CELAC signed off on a declaration promising equality, mutual benefit, and respect. But on this side of the world, we've learned something the hard way. You don't measure respect by what's written on paper. You measure it by what's written into the contract. So before we get caught up with the photo ops, ribbon cutting, and billion-dollar headlines, let's take a step back. Because while China builds fast and funds big, history shows us this. When repayment time comes and a country can't pay, infrastructure can become leverage or collateral. Take Sri Lanka, for example. After failing to repay massive loans, the country handed over its port to China under a 99-year lease. That port is now Chinese-controlled, not owned, but effectively lost for a generation. The warning is there. If we're not careful, what we build today could become someone else's tomorrow. And let's be honest, China has delivered in ways America never has. We've seen real infrastructure, highways, bridges, ports, stadiums, agriculture projects, scholarships, billions poured into the Caribbean and Latin America. But let's not be naive. China, like any superpower, expects something in return. That's how partnership works. America also expects something when it calls us its backyard. So here's a question Caribbean citizens must ask. If we are your backyard, then why haven't you invested in us the way China has? Where are the American-funded roads, the American-funded ports, the American-funded scholarships? For decades, America has made promises. Rarely have they come with delivery. Sometimes a medical ship sails by or a speech is given. But what lasting investment has America really made in the region? The truth is, neither superpower is a charity. Both want something. The Caribbean must understand that we cannot afford to be anyone's pawn or worse, anyone's afterthought. Our survival depends on building partnerships where we set the terms, we protect our sovereignty, and we remain in control of our future. Okay guys, that's all for this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Let's keep this discussion going, right? Until the next time, bye.